I think about ancient Rome all the time, specifically in the context of city builders. So when I heard there was going to be a new city builder, part of the Anno series, set in ancient Rome, I had to try it. And soon enough, after I did, the game was yelling at me for playing too long. But I had to settle one more island, or just spend a couple hours revamping one of my cities to be a little more efficient. After all, that's going to add up over time. Or maybe I just spend some time staring at my empire because the game is absolutely spectacular. So yeah, I spent quite a bit of time thinking about the Roman Empire and playing Anno 117 Pax Romana. But I do want to add one little disclaimer to this video. I have not played any of the other modern Anno games. So some of the features that I appreciate here could be Anno staples. And if so, if you played all the Anno games, you're a veteran, please let me know down below so that I can go play all the other Anno games, because I just spent 100 hours on this game and it feels like only a week's gone by. Oh, wait, that's because it has. So with that, let's get into it. Most of my experience with city builders were the older games, like Caesar 3, or modern reinterpretations like Citadellum. And there's always a little bit of jank that makes them feel outdated. Workers don't quite get to their houses, or maybe you have to be really careful about where you place buildings, otherwise the area is just not a nice enough neighborhood for those patricians to move in. Or maybe there's just a barbarian horde that's gonna completely roll your city. In comparison to all of this, I found Anno 117 to be very approachable. Yes, I did play through the campaign first, but even without that, you can turn on tutorials and follow them to learn the basics of setting up your own city. And the game does something ingenious. It breaks everything down into simple tasks. So you can click on a resource to see the entire production chain, everything that you need. You can also mouse over that resource or that specific building to see how long it takes to make everything, and then make yourself a spreadsheet to calculate all the optimal production ratios, like a normal person does. In addition, if you click on a citizen, then you get to see all of their needs, with new options unlocking as you meet population thresholds. So the game does a very good job of breaking everything down into easily achievable tasks, and it makes the daunting job of micromanaging a gigantic metropolis very approachable, provided you're willing to put in a little time to learn. And speaking of, it also handles city growth very differently, where instead of spending countless hours agonizing over making sure my best houses were in a neighborhood with a high enough happiness value that I could finally get the wealthiest citizens in, and also making sure that everything was in range with the entirely too small radiuses that most people would patrol, none of that is a concern. Road networks are very generous. It's very easy to upgrade roads as you progress through the game. You'll get concrete and then marble, and with marble, trust me, it's very easy to get around. Instead, a lot of the city management and growth and difficulty comes from the city's size itself. So, as you have a larger city, you get penalties to happiness, health, and fire safety, which is where you have to build buildings that increase the happiness, health, and fire safety. You have to move buildings that inflict a penalty outside of your city center, making kind of natural commercial districts. And also you have to set up specialists. These are basically people that give you a bunch of bonuses, and they're kind of OP. And if you want to get wealthier citizens to move in, just meet the needs of all of your prior citizens and upgrade houses. Additionally, let's say you do mess up, well, the game has tools like relocate, so you can just move those houses and fix your mistakes with minimal to no cost. There's pretty much a setting for everything, difficulty, cost, etc., and you can turn it down to a minimum if you want a really easy time in just free build mode, more or less, and you can also turn it up if you want a more challenging time. I went for advanced, which was what I felt a happy medium. But here's the thing. The game is more than just a city builder. It's an empire builder. So your initial island is going to have some resources. These are called fertilities. Lavender, for example, is a very common fertility on the starting island in Latium. But later on, people are going to want olive oil. How do you get olive oil? You have to go to a different island. And that island is going to have a whole new progression because you're starting from scratch. Sort of anything that you've already unlocked building-wise, you can use. But in terms of setting up production chains, getting resources for your citizens, you're starting over. And so there's that constant cycle of, ooh, I've done a bunch and I'm kind of stuck over here. Oh, but I can go over there and I can make some progress. You're constantly making progress and it feels amazing. And once you master your first island and your second island, what about third island? Or what about traveling to another province entirely? Because not only are you building in Latium, the Roman heartland, you can also go to Albion, the north, which would have been called Britannia, or I guess now the Isle of Great Britain. So you grab some of your mates and you head up there to have a right old party. And by that I mean you have to deal with the swamplands, much smaller islands, making it harder to construct perfect cities, and also maybe some invading angry Celts who are probably just mad because you took their home, but hey, you're a Roman, so it's fine. Actually, there's some interesting choices there where you can either follow the Celtic traditions or Romanize the populace. This has different repercussions, and ultimately you can do a mix of both. So, now that I've gone over the basics of the game, I want to show off my empire. So first up, my main city. This is the city that I've put the most time into, and it's also the least perfect because I had the least experience when I started building it. A good example of this is this whole thing, which it was pretty efficient. It was the most efficient thing I could do at the time, but I've now found some better ways, which I'll show you a little bit later. And then over here, I've got my farming district, which wasn't strictly necessary, but also it looks really pretty to have all the farms next to each other, so I did that. Sometimes you gotta make a few little sacrifices to efficiency. Then over here, a production district with a lot of renderers. The reason they're over here is they make citizens unhappy and unsafe, so I did not want them near all these houses. And then I've got the amphitheater, the pride and joy of any Roman city. Some new housing districts where I've made less mistakes, kind of doing a split but centralized design. Another little industrial district at the buffer zone. My main industrial district over here where you can see all of these dye works because I needed to make lots and lots of togas once to become consul. Yes, that's right. The Empress liked me so much she promoted me to consul, which gives me all sorts of fun special privileges, like just requisitioning someone's entire empire. I definitely didn't abuse that. Anyway, I also made plenty of vineyards to grow grapes for wine, because I wanted to ship that over to Albion. Now, in Latium, I also have my main farming island. The goal here was to grow olives, and of course, take advantage of the resin fertility. Oh, and the flax was also helpful. I needed that later too. So it started with just a little bit of a seaside port. This was my initial colony, and then I expanded it to this, and I expanded it to this, which sort of uses the same central avenue, but this time some of the bigger buildings are actually in the center, and I like this much, much better. Plus, beautiful farmland outside. One of my favorite industrial districts is right here, just because I managed to pack so many buildings into such a small area. And all of these resin tappers are actually efficient. It took so much work to place all these, like 80 out of 80, I got it perfect. And meanwhile, I used all the extra space for things like my potters, because I decided to produce pottery here. Now last up, I have Ravenna, or at the very least, last up in Latium. This is where all of my production is for the dye works that I mentioned earlier. This is also my newest city setup. So I've gone with, again, the side-by-side split, as I found this to be much more efficient than the really long stuff. Also, this is a Long Island, so needed to do something about that. Again, farms up here, they're looking good. A port district, which I'll admit, not 100% efficient. This building is currently not working, but it looks really aesthetic, so I kind of just left it because I don't actually need the extra production. This is way more about efficiency. These are all my snaileries. I need lots and lots of dye. So I found this to be at least the best setup so far, and what I really like about it is I can make these self-contained avenues and then have the huge buildings with massive radii that, as you can see, this covers all of this and all of this. Doesn't quite reach over here, unfortunately, but hey, it's pretty good. Got a mini industrial district up here. I have some aqueducts, almost fully utilizing this one. Got baths, theater, temple, all the fun stuff. Then here we have Albion, which I will admit, I have a lot of very beautiful empty islands, but this is the city that taught me the most about efficiently using space. Like, this island looks big, it is not that big. So I've got my harbor, I have all of my early houses here that I kind of crammed around the governor's villa, and then I started to expand over here, and I quickly hit marshland, and I quickly hit marshland. So I had to very carefully place the baths and the theater and the temple and also the sacred grove so that this fit together. I'm using sort of most of my population. I have a lot of extra population everywhere because I like building big cities. Then I unlocked tech to drain the farmland, so I put a whole bunch of farms here. Sorry, drain the swampland, not the farmland. It became farmland after I drained it. I did this mostly just for aesthetics, although it does kind of work out because the drainage channels might get in the way of other buildings. Doesn't really matter with farms. And hey, I need beer. My empire needs beer. This is my beer-producing capital of the world. I have more houses here. Here is all of my swamp production. So, you know, mud dryers, we've got ox pastures, all sorts of fun stuff. And this is the industrial district. The marble looks absolutely beautiful with the trees. Like, you know what? Let's zoom in here. Ah, look at this. It's so good. The graphics in this game, really spectacular. Similar thing here, where I was fitting the charcoal burners. Again, looks really good for marble roads. I do have a little bit more room, but this is not very much space. So I'm very happy with everything that I managed to fit in so far. Took a lot of searching for odd angles, and I'm not fully happy with resource coverage. Like, the baths covers almost everybody here. Doesn't quite cover everyone here. The temple, that one actually pretty much covers everyone. Theater, not quite, so I had to build a second one. And some of the Celtic marvels, not really big enough to have the huge AoE. Might build a second one over here later. Yeah, that is my city in Albion, which, goddamn, sunset over the city, absolutely spectacular. So now I want to talk about one thing that annoyed me about the game before wrapping everything up with a verdict. I do have one big complaint about Anno 117 though. The campaign sucks. It sucks so much that I almost missed out on a lot of the fun here, because I started with a campaign, and sure, there's a hint of a story, but most of the story threads from Act 1 are completely forgotten by Act 2, and then the whole thing just ends. And I was worried that the entire game was going to be as clunky and unfinished. I hadn't really encountered any of that in my gameplay, but I was like, well, if they half-assed this to this degree, to the point where it's at best super unfinished and at worst just a tutorial with a half-assed story on top, is the sandbox mode going to be that bad? Thankfully, no. The sandbox mode is very good, and it really doesn't matter if you skip the campaign. You'll be missing basically nothing. And so in conclusion, I absolutely recommend Anno 117, both as a city builder, to recommend to your friend who's intimidated by most city builders, since it's very approachable. You can play on normal difficulty, and it's really hard to trigger disasters that cause any permanent harm to your city. About the only thing I can think of would be building up a whole bunch of supply chains and then massively changing your population. But aside of that, should be pretty okay. What really sucked me in was the min-max potential. I'm sure my cities are far from fully optimized, but they're so much better than when I started. In fact, so much so that I'm probably going to be making a completely separate video on some of the things that I learned over the past 100 hours on min-maxing my cities. And this level of min-maxing, the fact that I can just build on multiple islands, makes the sandbox mode way more engaging than most other city builders. And it's also beautiful. You can legit just go into the first-person mode, or go into the zoomed camera mode, and scroll around your city, watch everything in motion, your citizens going about their business, celebrating a festival, you name it. And it looks great. I have noticed in first-person mode and when zoomed in, there are some very slight anomalies. Sometimes the rounded corners of a road or a diagonal don't quite fit with the clean-cut squares of a map. It's immersion breaking enough that I'd like to see that rounded out in a patch, but it doesn't get in the way of gameplay. And hey, it's a really cool feeling to build a city from the ground up, and then be able to sit back and look at your creation. I think this is a game that I'm going to be coming back to several times with future DLCs. So, those are some of my thoughts on Anno 117 Pax Romana. A game that I wasn't sure what to expect going into it, because, yeah, I'd played a couple of the older Anno games. I think it was 2077 or 2070. I'm not quite sure. I'm maybe mixing that up with Cyberpunk. But I hadn't played any recent ones, and I don't really remember that much of the ones that I did play. Where I got started with my city builder journey was Caesar 3, a game that I actually found in my local library. Yes, back when games could be physical things. That's right, you could find games at a local library because games came on discs, and you put the disc into your computer and it was a physical object you can hold. And yes, I know this isn't a copy of Caesar 3, this is Age of Empires 2, which is another great game that I actually own because, yeah, the other thing about taking the game out from the library is that you kind of don't end up owning the game. I know it's ironic to talk about games and ownership and all of this, when also talking about a company, Ubisoft, that doesn't want you to own your games. But, yeah, that's why GOG, or Good Old Games, is great. The thing about Anno 117 is, it is absolutely the sort of game where I would sit down and play it, and the hours would melt away. It would be dark out, it would be like 5 p.m., and I'm like, what the fuck happened to the time? Oh, right, I was just building a city. So yeah, had a lot of fun with it, and again, I was surprised at how approachable it was. Personally, I found normal to be a little bit on the easier side. It's certainly the sort of thing that would be fun for challenge runs, but just for normal sandbox gameplay, a little too easy for my taste, so I played on advanced. I expect Legendary would be quite a bit more challenging, especially dealing with natural disasters and that sort of thing. Now, if you want to see my thoughts on some other games, you can check out my Steam Curator page, which is linked down below. Also, if you want to see more Anno 117 content, I'm thinking about making that tips and tricks video. Haven't 100% decided. Let me know down below if that's something you're interested in. And also, I have kind of an idea for a challenge run that I might do. Again, not 100% sure. Let me know down below if that's something that interests you. On the other hand, maybe you're looking for something else to watch, check out my thoughts on Dredge. It's a very different kind of game, but it does have some of those sim and management elements. Plus, it's got a really good vibe, so if you just want to play something and chill, Dredge very much is the game for you. I'll link that up in the card and down below. For now, thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed. Be sure to join the Discord, join the community, give yourself a notification roll if you want to see more. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.